Hello Internet, welcome back to Tromsø Twilight, the channel where I, Vincent, talk to you, somebody out there in the digital night, about books, movies, music that I enjoy, find interesting, or a combination of the two. I'm sitting up here in Arctic Norway, and today I'll be talking about I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. Now, Harpman originally published this book in the mid-90s. It was published in French and translated originally as Mistress of Silence. It was more or less forgotten until a year or two ago when Vintage republished it and it found a new audience. People have been talking about it, hyping it up. I've seen it on the face out on tables in bookshops. I've had it recommended to me a couple of times because people know that I like feminist literature and sci-fi. It's a sort of dystopia. If you don't want to know anything about the contents of this book, be aware that I'll be talking about it. So you might find some spoilers in this video, although I'll try not to give away the ending. Now, the concept of this book is that the narrator, who is known only as the child, has been imprisoned together with 39 adult women at a time that she cannot remember and that the women only vaguely recall. There are men outside the cage who watch them. The lights are always on, they're fed at regular intervals, and she knows nothing of the world before this imprisonment occurred, but the adult women recall something about it. At the start of the book, she's in a kind of schizoid state where she has built some fantasies around one of the male guards. She seems to have experienced an orgasm accidentally when having a fantasy. So she started to tell herself stories, and the other women become curious about what the child is thinking. She starts to count her heartbeats, and through this she develops a sense of time. And I thought the book was all going to take place inside this cage, but actually about a quarter or a third of the way through, they end up outside and they start to explore the world outside of the bunker where they've been caged. I won't go into a lot of detail about how this works, except to say that for a period of time, they live in a kind of anarchist, non-hierarchical community of women. So the book, with the title I Who Have Never Known Men, is sort of ambivalent about this fact that this girl, later woman, has never known a man. She's only seen the guards who crack whips to threaten them but never speak or interact with them in any way. And the women of the book have a sort of peaceful life without patriarchy, without hierarchy, without hierarchies of dominance or control. They organize themselves into intuitive groups around their own interests or needs or chemistry. So there's a certain utopian aspect, but at the same time, their life as purely women is literally and figuratively barren, and the women of the group, at least many of them, miss intimacy between the sexes. I think in this way, the book is staging the problems of gender tension and patriarchy and male dominance. It's almost as if there's a hidden wish in the book to be able to live in the same non-hierarchical cooperative fashion, but without having to sacrifice a whole gender in order to do so. Another interesting theme of this book is that it becomes apparent after a while that it doesn't seem like the guards who were keeping the women in the cage were any more aware of why they were doing it than the women were why they were there. So I think there's a critique or a satire on power and control and structures of power in this book, which is about how power and dominance and subjugation is almost like a self-replicating system where the individual needs, desires, personality of the people involved becomes irrelevant. It's just a machine that keeps rolling. Until, in this book, it doesn't, until it's interrupted. I read this with my friend who I have a book club with. He and I choose a book kind of alternately each month, and this was my book that I chose for us to read. And he was asking me about other sci-fi novels that this might remind me of. And I said to him that I thought actually it was more similar to existentialist literature. It reminds me a little bit of Beckett, and especially the play Endgame. What I mean by this is that the book strips away a lot of the fundamental assumptions about the world, life, how it works, what it means, what we're doing, to show the core mystery and question of being born, living, dying. It raises questions, this book, about time. What is time? What is time? What's it for? When is time created? Is it time because her heart beats counting seconds and minutes over the span of a life? Or is it time when people were pregnant and developed children and gave birth and reproduced? Or does the act of writing the novel create time? It becomes a document, so it's like an artifact. How is time created and understood? What is the goal of a life? The only other sci-fi adjacent book that it actually reminded me of is this book, The Wall, by Marlene Haushofer, which again is kind of one of these forgotten classics that Vintage have republished. This is a bit of an earlier book, a bit heavier on the environmentalist themes, where Harpman's book is more existentialist. But I think they're almost worth reading as like sister novels. And I would say if you were going to read one of them, I actually prefer this one, The Wall. Finally, I discovered after I read the book, in fact, my friend Edward told me that Harpman was a Holocaust survivor and she survived it as a child. So I think that the book partly stages this sense of the world being alien, a sense of alienation, separation, confusion that comes from having survived a disaster, a horror that many others did not survive. And this sense of the child coming out of the cage, which is all she's ever known, and into a world that is somehow fundamentally changed on a metaphorical level, like a fable, could be the story of any child who survived the Holocaust. Or also reminded me of J.G. Ballard, who as a child was in a prisoner of war camp and always described being released from the camp as a kind of core trauma for him, because suddenly he was in contact with a wider, larger, much more complicated world that he didn't really understand. What he didn't know of the world when he was in the internment camp, he never missed. That's my short discussion about this book. As I was reading it, I found it somewhat repetitive in the way that she continually emphasizes, I didn't know this, I didn't know this, I'd never known this, I've never heard of this. That started to irritate me somewhat while I was reading. But after reading it, there are so many vignettes, so many images, such a strange, spooky, alien atmosphere that I like it more having finished it than I did while I was reading it. If you've read it, please let me know what you think of it. Jump in the comments, let me know. If you've read this, The Wall, also I'd love to hear what you think about this novel. I may do a video about it at some point. That's it for now. Thanks for listening. I'll be back again soon with a new video. If you'd like to see it, please hit subscribe. If not, I understand. Take care, look after yourself.